Hello, I'm Amir Hafeez Malik and my topic for today is intensive and extensive reading. This is very important as far as the students are concerned because reading skill is very important for them. They have to read text, they have to understand the text, and they have to reproduce the text. So these two types of reading known as intensive and extensive reading are very important. You all know that reading is a purposeful activity. There is always a purpose behind reading. So one can be reading intensively and two can be reading extensively. Let's go with the concept of intensive reading. Intensive reading involves learner reading in detail with specific learning aims and tasks. For example, the learner read a short text and put events from it onto chronological order. In the classroom, intensive reading is for thorough understanding. Intensive reading is sometimes called narrow reading. So when we read this definition and concept, we get that it is a reading type which involves reading of short text but complete understanding of that text, where the events are put into chronological order, the historical order: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, first thing first, and second thing second, and third thing third, and last thing last. So yes, it is basically a classroom reading activity, and it is also called narrow reading in the sense that the reader has to go into the narrow details, to the minute details of each and every aspect of the reading material. So this is intensive reading. To be brief, we can say intensive reading is done for two major purposes. Number one, reading in detail. So although the text is very short, but it is read in detail. Every part is minutely observed, read, understood, and reproduced. Number two, specific learning aims and tasks. There are always specific learnings, aims, and tasks behind reading intensively. Intensive reading material include reports, notices, contracts, news articles, blog posts, and short stories. So you can see that at the first sight we know that the material of these texts is normally very short, but it is also demanding on the part that every minute detail, every simple and minor point should be in notice of the reader. So the text like the reports, notices, contracts, news articles, blog posts, and short stories, they are short to read, but they demand that every information shared in these texts must be remembered by the reader. We move on to the intensive reading activities. So for taking the activities about intensive reading, we can go with skimming a text for specific information. Number two, to answer true or false statements. Number three, filling gaps in a summary. Number four, scanning a text to match heading to paragraphs, and finally scanning jumbled paragraphs to put them into correct order. You can see that all these activities can become possible if the reader retains the information read by him or her in the text with every minute detail, specific information, then true false answer, then gap filling, then matching headings to the paragraph, and then jumbled means the disordered sentences and order them. So this was all about intensive reading. You have read what is intensive reading, what are the materials, what are the activities, what are the purposes of intensive reading. We now move forward to extensive reading. Extensive reading involves reading long text for general understanding with the intention of enjoying the text. So know that the major difference between extensive reading and intensive reading is the size of the text. The extensive reading texts are too large, too long as compared to the intensive reading texts, which are very short and limited. So extensive reading involves reading long text for general understanding with the intention of enjoying the text. Extensive reading helps learner to build reading speed and reading fluency. So this is one of the most important advantages of extensive reading. By reading longer text, the reader improves two things. Number one, reading speed, and number two, reading fluency. So this is also very useful for the readers. Extensive reading is done for two major purposes. Number one, to develop general reading skills. So these are the general reading skills, and number two, enjoyment. The element of pleasure and enjoyment is one of the dominant aspect of extensive reading. Extensive reading material include magazines, yes, magazines, novels, comic books, history books, biographies and autobiographies. So these materials, these texts are really longer in size. These are lengthy texts. These are long texts. The novels, the comic books, the history books, we all know that they are the heavy books, they are the bulky books. So readers interested in undertaking the reading of magazines, novel, comic book, history books, biographies and autobiographies are the readers with extensive reading skills. So these materials provide them lengthy material for reading activities. As far as extensive reading activities are concerned, we come to know that they can be used for skim and scan, write book reports and book reviews. So one has to, if one wants to write book reports or book reviews, it is important that they read thoroughly, they read longer texts and they are able to describe them. Number 3 is join book club discussions. So for book club discussions, again, one needs to have a great knowledge about the text. Finally, creative writing, summary and article writing, these are the product of extensive reading skill. If one is expert in extensive reading, yes, one can be a very good summary writer and article writer. So this was all about intensive and extensive reading. I hope you would have understood the concept very easily, because both are very important and very different in nature, one to the other. Intensive reading with short text and extensive reading with lengthy text, both have their advantages, both have their utilities, both have their importance and significance, and both have their role for the reader. So you can reread, you can watch this video and you can understand the difference between them. Thank you very much. So आज हमने बात की एक्सटेंसिव और इंटेंसिव और एक्सटेंसिव रीडिंग की, दोनों ही बहुत ही अहम है। जैसा कि हम सब जानते हैं कि रीडिंग जो मुतालिया करना होता है उसके पीछे कोई ख़ास मकसद होता है, और जब हम इंटेंसिव रीडिंग की बात करते हैं तो ये एक ऐसी रीडिंग कहलाती है जिसमें मवाद, टेक्स्ट का साइज़ बहुत ही कम मुख्तसर होता है, लेकिन इसमें बहुत ज़्यादा तवज्जो की ज़रूरत होती है। एक एक पहलू को गौर से देखना पड़ता है और मुकम्मल तौर पर समझना पड़ता है। आमतौर पर इसे नैरो रीडिंग भी हम कहते हैं। इसके दो अहम मकासद होते हैं, डिटेल तफसील से पढ़ने के लिए और फिर ख़ास मकासद के लिए इसे इस्तेमाल किया जाता है। इसका मटेरियल रिपोर्ट्स होती हैं, नोटिस होती हैं, मुआहदे कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स होते हैं, न्यूज़ आर्टिकल्स होते हैं, ब्लॉग पोस्ट होती हैं और शॉर्ट स्टोरी या अफसाने हुआ करते हैं। जहाँ तक इंटेंसिव रीडिंग एक्टिविटीज़ का ताल्लुक, तो इसमें स्किमिंग भी की जा सकती है, ट्रू फॉल्स आंसर भी दिए जा सकते हैं, समरी में गैप फिलिंग भी की जा सकती है, पैराग्राफ और हेडिंग की मैचिंग की एक्टिविटीज़ भी की जा सकती हैं, और फिर डिसऑर्डर्ड पैराग्राफ्स को आपस में सही तरतीब से जोड़ने का काम भी इंटेंसिव रीडिंग के ज़रिए किया जा सकता है। एक्सटेंसिव रीडिंग में टेक्स्ट का साइज़ लेंथी होता है और इसमें जनरल अंडरस्टैंडिंग होती है, और इसका जो ज़्यादा फ़ायदा होता है, इरादा होता है, वो ये होता है कि इसमें इंजॉयमेंट का, प्लेजर का मकसद होता है। एक्सटेंसिव रीडिंग दो फ़ायदे देती है, रीडिंग की स्पीड बढ़ा देती है और फ्लुएंसी, रवानी भी बढ़ा देती है। एक्सटेंसिव रीडिंग दो मकासद के लिए की जाती है, जनरल रीडिंग स्किल को बेहतर बनाने के लिए और इन्जॉयमेंट, तफरीह के लिए। इसके मटेरियल में शामिल हैं मैगजीन्स, नावल्स, कॉमिक बुक्स, तारीखी किताबें, बायोग्राफीज़ और ऑटोबायोग्राफीज़। जहाँ तक इसकी एक्टिविटीज़ का ताल्लुक है तो एक्सटेंसिव रीडिंग एक्टिविटीज़ में स्किमिंग एंड स्कैनिंग शामिल होती हैं, किसी भी किताब का रिव्यू लिखने के लिए या रिपोर्ट लिखने के लिए इस्तेमाल की जाती है, बुक क्लब डिस्कशन ज्वाइन करने के लिए ये एक्टिविटीज़ की जाती हैं, और ख़ास तौर पर सबसे अहम फ़ायदा ये है कि क्रिएटिव राइटिंग जैसा कि समरी राइटिंग या आर्टिकल राइटिंग में भी एक्सटेंसिव रीडर को बहुत ज़्यादा महारत हासिल हो जाती है। तो आज इस मौजू को पढ़ने के बाद कि इंटेंसिव रीडिंग क्या है और एक्सटेंसिव रीडिंग क्या है, आप बआसानी अपने रीडिंग स्किल को इम्प्रूव कर सकते हैं। आई होप यू वुड हैव एंजॉयड दिस लेक्चर। थैंक यू सो वेरी मच।